Welcome to February 2026 block of the month. This month we will be making these two blocks, so let's get stitching. Let's go ahead and start stitching block 1 for February. And for this one we are going to be making 4 of these units. And let's go ahead and lay those out. They're all 4 going to look like that, so I have my pieces cut. And I'm just going to lay them out in the same configuration. Okay, so we're going to make them just like that. And we're going to start by joining these two 90-degree edges first. So those, and then adding this. Now these come out to exactly 4.5 inches. So if you're not sure if your 1/4 inch seam is great or accurate, you may want to cut these like a 1/4 inch bigger on these squares before you trim them on the diagonal. And then that would give you a little bit extra that you could trim off so that you can end up with the perfect 4.5 inch size. So I'm going to go ahead and put these right sides together. Okay, I'm just going to finger press these open, and it doesn't really matter which way your seam allowance goes. And then we're going to match it with the larger triangle. And these you just want to kind of line up the whole shape. So this edge should line up, and then your 90-degree angle should line up also. And then go ahead and be careful because this is a bias seam here. Okay, now we can check those. And then I'm just going to finger press that back towards the larger triangle. And then we can just trim off these little cornered pieces here. And there's our unit. We'll give those a good press. And then we can go on to making some 4-patch units. Before I head over to the ironing machine, I'm just gonna trim these off. Okay, and then our 4 patches are going to be the white and the solid teal. So I am going to just join all of these squares together. Okay, and then I'm just going to press these to the teal solid, and then we're going to eventually sew them together like this to make a 4-patch. So I'm going to get my sewing machine. Okay, I finger pressed to the teal solid, and then I'm just going to line these up, and the seam should just nest in there really nicely together, and then we'll sew that. And we're going to be making 4 of these. Okay, and that's what our 4-patch looks like. So let's go ahead and press all those. Okay, all of our units are pressed and I have them laid out on the design board exactly how they go in our block. And you just want to be paying attention that the teals are all going in a diagonal line this way and this way, so you know you got those oriented correctly. And then this unit just kind of wraps around, so the gingham is like pointing kind of around the block like that, and then you should have the solid teal here touching the print, the largest print size. So make sure it's oriented correctly, and then we'll just go ahead and we'll sew that together like a 9-patch. We'll sew them together in rows and then put the rows finally together. Okay, let's give those a press. I have my rows laid back out, and when I did the pressing on the top and bottom rows, I pressed to the outer 4-patch squares, and then on the inner row, I pressed my seams towards the solid center square. So then those seams will nest together when we put them. We're going to put them right sides together, line it up, and then sew that seam. Okay, I'm going to give that a press, and then we're going to add our borders. Now I'm going to sew together the first border that we're adding, and it takes 2 white 6 by 1.5 inch rectangles joined together by a 1.5 inch teal print square. I'm just finger pressing that towards the teal center, and then I'm going to get my block and just pick a side and add this piece to it. And then I'm going to finger press this towards the teal and add this piece to the opposite side that we just added to. give that a press. For the second round of the border, we're going to be using these 7" by 1.5" white and teal print rectangles. And we're going to join the white with a 1.5" teal square between them, and then a white square will be added between 2 of the teal pieces. So we'll get all those pieced together. Okay, and then on these, I'm finger pressing towards the teal rectangles. Okay, and then we're going to join a white strip with a teal strip, matching up those center squares, and they should nest. Okay, then I will press these towards the teal. Okay, that looks good. Okay, and now I'm going to add these to the 2 sides that we have not yet put a border on. So in this orientation, I have the first border that I've added, and I've got it on the top and the bottom. And so then on the sides, I'm going to go ahead and add this border to it. Okay, and then I'm going to go press that, and then we'll add our last round. And the last border, I'm just going to put a white square between the teal print rectangles. And then I'm going to just press those seams towards the teal print. Okay. And then I'm going to add it to the side then that where we added our first set of borders, then this last set goes next to that. Okay, we can give that a press, and then we're ready for block 2 for February. Okay, to start our second block for February, we're going to be making a few half square triangles, and I'm just going to start by drawing a diagonal line on the back side of 2 of the teal gingham. Okay. And then I'm going to pair them right sides together with a teal print, and I'm going to stitch on each side of that line. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and cut right on that line. And then we will have 4 half square triangles. These are slightly oversized, so we will need to trim them. So I'm going to go ahead and press and trim now. Okay, I'm going to use the block lock ruler that I have a 2.5 inch square, and these will be trimmed to 2.5 inch. And they came out pretty good, so I am going to just kind of line it up in the corner so that I only have to trim 2 sides and then trim off that one little dog ear that's sticking out there. And there's hardly anything that we're trimming off, but this does make for better units when we're making half square triangles. And then trim off that little dog ear. Okay, so we have all of them trimmed. And then we're going to kind of lay out our block, get everything in the right orientation, and I'm going to start with the center. It's kind of a little 9 patch, so I'm just laying these out, how they are going to appear in the block. Okay, and then make sure everything is oriented correctly. I have the teal print pointing towards the gingham, and then I'm just going to go ahead and sew it together like a 9 patch. Sew these in rows and then join the 2 rows together. Okay, and then I am going to give these a quick press, and on the upper row and the bottom row, I'm going to press towards the white solid square, and then the center I'm going to press away. So I'm also pressing to the white solid squares, and then those seams will nest when we go to put our rows together. I have those pressed, and now I'm going to nest those seams and sew together the rows to make the 9 patch. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to give that a press, and then we're going to lay out all of our pieces to start assembling the block. Okay, our center is all done, and so let's lay out all of our pieces. I'm going to put the solid teal in the 4 corners, and then it's going to be gingham, rectangle, print, rectangle, gingham, rectangle, and it does that all the way around. Okay, so that's essentially what our block is going to look like. And I'm going to kind of assemble this as this is a row, that will be a row, and then I'll stitch these pieces together here and add them to the center and then stitch it together the rows. So let's go ahead and stitch these rows now. Okay, I'm going to give all these units a press and then we can assemble the block. Let's join the block together. When I pressed these outer pieces, I pressed everything towards the gingham. That way it will nest with the way that we've pressed this block here. And then the same at the top row, I just pressed towards the gingham. So now I'm going to do these two side pieces. Okay, and then I'm going to finger press these towards the units that we just added. So the outer units. And then when we add the top and bottom, everything should nest. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to give that a press and then I'm going to add the borders to it just like I did for the first block. Let's join the block together. When I pressed these outer pieces, I pressed everything towards the gingham. That way it will nest with the way that we've pressed this block here. And then the same at the top row, I just pressed towards the gingham. So now I'm going to do these two side pieces. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to give that a press and then I'm going to add the borders to it just like I did for the first block.